Okay, does that work? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, prynawn da pawb, good afternoon everyone, and thank you really for the invite to come and speak to you for a very short space of time this afternoon. I've been talking to a few people, talking to Abigail and Rachel and Carol, and I know you've had a fantastic morning, so I'll try not to spoil it in the next 30 minutes or so, okay? What I was asked to do was to share with you our experience as a fire and rescue service on how we've adapted to change and how we've really taken from where we were in the late 80s and early 90s into kicking indoors, squirting water, putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff, and even getting cats out of trees, to moving our thought process to being far more preventative and providing education to our community. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. So there's no flames and no fire drills, hopefully, which I know you'll all be accustomed to of fire alarms going throughout your hospitals, certainly in Cardiff and the Vale. But enough on that, Abby. I'm sure we can cover that again at another time. So who are we as a fire and rescue service? We came together in 1996 through local government reorganisation. We're in Wales. There used to be 8 county fire and rescue services, or fire brigades as they were known then. So we've got made up of the former Gwent, South Glamorgan and Mid Glamorgan, which gave us a combined fire authority of South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. We serve from Monmouthshire to Bridgend, Cardiff Bay to Trustshort Upper Brecon, and we serve about half the population of South Wales, about 1.6 million people. We've been through a significant reform programme in where our fire cover is. Regrettably, we've closed a good few fire and rescue stations throughout our community, so we're left with 47 strategically placed fire and rescue stations, which got different crewing models and they got different vehicles on them depending on the risks within the area. We've got an occupational health unit, we've got a training and development centre at Cardiff Gate, and we've got a headquarter site in Llantrisant. And then we've got a control room where we've merged our control room function with Mid and West Wales Fire. So there's one fire control. So if you phone in Ceredigion or Cardiff, you will go through to the same control room. And we've co-located that with South Wales Police to get early information and intelligence on any operational incidents that are impacting across our service area. We've got a budget of £71.8 million this year, which in cash terms is less than what we had in 2010. Our headcount is about 1,836 staff as well, with mixed contracts of whole-time, on-call firefighters, and then corporate professional support staff as well. Okay, so the piece of the legislation I wanted to focus the next few minutes on was around community safety. Whitehall government brought in a piece of legislation called the Fire and Rescue Services Act in 2004. At that time, we became devolved to Welsh Government, so we had a devolved function, the 3 fire and rescue services in Wales, and they enacted the same piece of legislation in England as they did for us within Wales. And under Section 6 of the Fire and Rescue Services Act, which is obviously about 13 years prior to the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, that gets us to think collaboratively and gets us to think in a preventative way. This piece of legislation came out way before that. And what it says is that we must be able to provide advice, information and guidance to the public and the communities that we serve on how to reduce fires. And that's generally across the homes and how we live our lives. So what do we do as a fire and rescue service? So, sorry, I just clarify, this piece of legislation is different to managing buildings like this in the hospitals. We do that under the Regulatory Reform Order or the Fire Safety Order. That's a different and distinct piece of legislation. This is all about making our community safer as they go about their daily lives from the risks of fire. So we got extensive programs. We got schools programs from foundation phase, Key Stage 1, right up to Key Stage 4. And for the last 3 years, we've had 4 modules on a Welsh Baccalaureate as well. So we can, through pupil-led learning, teach them around home safety, wildfire safety, road safety, which we've also got a statutory duty to reduce as well, and also water safety. So there's a wider remit than just fire with our schools programs as well. Through the schools programs, we speak to about 40,000 young people every year from right across our service area, right from the very young ones, right up to the ones which are leaving school, left school and gone on to learning within colleges as well. And I think when we reflect back on the programme of reform that we've been on, we were heavily criticised when we were going certainly to the younger children within our school system saying, well, they'll never understand. They'll never understand about reducing kitchen fires. They'll never understand about putting cigarettes out and everything else. And you'd be surprised what our young people learn from us as their peers, really. And, you know, we've had great success. They might not understand the full detail of it, but when they go back and they nag us as parents and grandparents and everyone else, their aunties and uncles, why haven't we got a smoke detector? I don't know what to do if a smoke detector goes off. What do I do in the night? The nag factor from the younger ones to where they get that early messaging really, really does pay dividends. And I'll show you some performance stats right at the end. We've got a crimes and consequences. So you'll see the number of fires that we go to each year is about 6,500. We've reduced it down to. Over 80% of them are deliberately set. So 80% of fires that our crews go to every single year are through arson and deliberate acts of fire setting. So we've got a crimes and consequences programme where we work with the justice system. We run CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy, for our young people that are arson inclined also. And then we also run a Phoenix programme, which those on the cusp of exclusion or on the cusp of offending will come and spend a week with us, and we'll take them through the principles of teamwork, good communication, responsible citizenship, but all anchored in community safety around water safety, road safety particularly, but also in fire safety as well. And then we're the first and only fire and rescue service in the UK to be running a fire cadets programme out of Park Prison in Bridgend with the youth offending wing and the endeavour wing also. So our cadets programme is a 2-year BTEC programme that run on school term times, and it runs for 14 to 18-year-olds. And at the end of that, we have a blended environmental learning. So we take the most able and talented to those that were in our education system that may not be attaining too much throughout the schooling years. And we take them on our 2-year BTEC programme. And you get people at the end of it with A stars, and you get people at the end of it where our young people, some of them are only leaving with that BTEC qualification. That's the only qualification that they've attained to date. So we thought we'd try and take that into a prison environment. A 2-year programme is a little bit long because not all the inmates are in for that length of time. But the premise is that once they've been through a modified cadet programme within the prison environment, and you want to see the risk assessments of trying to get a fire engine in with ladders into a prison, is quite difficult in all fairness. But it's a modified programme, and we've got now cadets that will be programmed. They're going through it within the prison environment, and when they are released and they live within South Wales, they'll be matched up with a fire cadet branch, which we have 12 across South Wales area at the moment. So it's a really exciting programme to be working with Park Prison on. And then we have seasonal campaigns also around, it might be Diwali, it might be Christmas, it might be Easter with grass fires, etc. So we have seasonal messages that we put out also. We were the first and only full service accredited to be white ribbon accredited. People ask why. There's a couple of reasons. As a workforce, only 3% of our operational firefighters are female, which isn't a great statistic to be having. But also across South Wales, we've had tragic incidents of people losing their life where the perpetrator have used arson as a weapon of intent for domestic abuse and sexual violence. And therefore, as a fire and rescue service, we want to show and clearly show our communities that we are there for everyone and inclusive of everyone. So you'll see all of our fire trucks branded up with white ribbon, and you'll be surprised the level of conversations that just promotes with people out there, and the conversation allows us to get the foot in the door and have those conversations. So we've trained now all our staff to level 2 on the framework of domestic abuse and sexual violence framework, and they're the eyes and ears, or when they're out there spotting people who might be being victims of, and being able to make the right referrals into the right pathways as well, and being able to have those honest conversations in a safe environment if it's right at that time, and if not. And then we also provide 24/7 cover where someone, if arson has been used, and you'd be surprised how often arson is used as a weapon of intent by perpetrators of domestic abuse and sexual violence, is that we can get someone out on that evening or on that day to fit interventions, whether it be letter guards, advice, safe rooms, smoke detectors and everything else that we can within the properties as well. And I would say across our service area, we're probably doing about 60 of them a month. It's quite a shocking statistic. And then Bernie, our sheep, can't come to Wales and not love a sheep, can you? But there's a serious message in that. It's an engagement tool that was developed and designed with social marketing, with colleges up in around the kind of Taff area, and it's what we hang our grass fire and wildfire and forest fire messaging and education system advice on across our schools. And then the last one up on the top left is a schematic and a program that we've run generally throughout the year, but over the spring, particularly in the summer, and now school holidays are closing, is around water safety as well, but also tapping into the nighttime economy for those that partake in a drink and might be walking past the bay, over the barrage, or past rivers and streams. You'd be surprised on how many times people feel it invincible after having a few. Never felt like that. Okay, so you might ask, so what difference? So what I've done, I've taken a snapshot of the last 15 years. And as you can see, out of our operational demand, so all operational incidents that we were attending 15 years ago is just short of 36,000. Last year, we went to 17,609, which was slightly up last year than the year before because of the very dry, hot, extended spring and summer that we had. So a 51% reduction in our operational demand. Now, what that allows us to do is to put more time and effort from our operational crews back into our school visits. So when they're not out chasing fire engines down the road and putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff, they're able to spend more time, one, on their own competency-based training to make them more professional, more proficient, and even safer in the workplace, but also being able to invest more time in our education programs as well. I'll get to it on the next slide. Right. So from fires, just over 23,000 down to 6,500, and bear in mind the ratio of 80-20. So 80% of those fires are deliberately set as well, which is a league table I'm not proud as a fire and rescue service that we virtually right at the top of in all fairness. So there's still a lot of work to do. Whilst we've reduced the number of fires that we now go to as opposed to the ones that we used to go to, the ratio between deliberate and accidental is quite significant for us. So fatalities from fires. One fatality is one too many from an accidental dwelling fire at home. Reflecting back to the previous slides around fire and rescue services in Wales and how we come together in 1996. The number of people that lost their lives in dwelling fires in 1996 was 36 people across South Glamorgan, Mid Glamorgan and Gwent. And as you can see, the continuing downward trend for that. And then accidental dwelling fires also. So these are the things I believe that we are being able to directly influence through lots of different mechanisms. So I talked about our schools programs, but something that we've also got is an extensive home fire safety check, or home safety check as we now call it, because we've actually extended our home safety check in parts of Aneurin Bevan and parts of Cwm Taff to encompass fire check, as you'd want us to do. But we also obviously tag on to that with being receptive and aware of any domestic abuse and sexual violence. But we do vulnerability assessment if the individual is vulnerable to crime, and we've been able to issue crime advice on that. But we also do a slips, trips and falls assessment, and we've got a referral pathway with Aneurin Bevan and Cwm Taff to make, if our crews become aware of that person being vulnerable to slips, trips and falls, and prevent them doing their hips and their femurs and everything else, and then coming into a protected healthcare pathway, and then the chance of independently living thereafter becomes a lot less as they get older, is something that we're keen to reduce. And we also give smoking cessation advice as well if the occupant is a smoker. So I think that is a direct influence. And then the other bit that we've been able to do since we've been devolved since 2004 is influence Welsh Government on a legislation that they've been able to introduce. So we were active supporters of the introduction of the sprinkler measure. So all new build properties, care homes, student accommodation are now fitted with sprinklers on their build, although there has been some property developers, larger in name generally, that have been able to find some loopholes on that by banking land and getting their planning apps in sooner rather than later. But so certainly building that prevention agenda and sustainability going forward. Just mindful of time, because I want to do some questions on that later, Injuries from fire as well, 368 down to 150. You know, that again is a very great statistic, that a lot less people are getting hurt and injured through domestic dwelling fires. And I know our team's done a lot of work with Abby and yourselves around those that were presenting and are presenting to A&E with scalds and burns as well, because I think that we could introduce something there was another referral pathway. You know, if we can find out how someone got burnt or they got the scald, it's something that we could potentially utilise to getting over the threshold to deliver prevention and education advice. How do we get to the right properties at the right time? There's a couple of different ways that we use. So we use Mosaic, which is a social marketing tool, but far more reliable than that. We've got everyone over the age of 65 registered with a GP in Wales. We know their address. Then we overlay that then with Western Power data. So Western Power run a vulnerability awareness. So you can, if you're a vulnerable user, you can register for a priority service. And the there's 21 categories, and the top 7 actually make you most vulnerable in our communities. And that's generally that people are getting older, they lose their mobility, or they got mental health issues through dementia, alcohol or drug abuse as well. They become really risky from the effects and having an accidental dwelling fire. So that's how we target our activities, so we make sure that we get over the threshold and to those at most at risk. And I think there's a lot more that we can do, and I don't think the GDPR regs and should be getting in the way around data sharing, because I know that we're already doing it and we shouldn't be afraid of being bold at keeping people safe in our communities. I'm not going to dwell on that, Abby. It was unwanted fire signals, in case you missed it. Much better indeed, yeah. Great working relationship with Abby and the team around reducing unwanted fire signals. We have managed to get a reduction across South Wales, and you think of the number of properties that have been built and developed across particularly this area of South Wales, across our Cardiff belt. You know, the skyline's totally changed, and all of those properties are built with smoke control, fire engineering solutions, heat detectors, smoke detectors, and everything else. So I think it's still a good statistic. It's not maybe up there with the top percentages, but you know, somewhere in around the 10% mark isn't too bad in all fairness. And then special service calls. These are calls that we go to which are non-fire related. So road traffic collisions, water rescues, cats up trees, people stuck on bridges and everything else. I don't know if I'm going to point to this one. It's 2017. You can see 2016-17. You see a bit of a spike on the graph. What we undertook there was a national trial across the UK around using firefighters to go to cardiac arrest calls. So it was agreed with the Fire Brigade Union, which is quite a strong and influential union within the trade union movement, well respected across all the services and the work that they do for their members and protecting their members. But there was a High Court case back in 2004 that actually said firefighters going to medical calls instead of or in addition to any medical resources doesn't fit within a firefighter's roadmap. Although the judge did determine it would be a good thing for them to do, and therefore the employer should come to a discussion around enabling it to happen. It took an awful long time from 2004 to 2016 to actually get some trials off the ground across the UK, and we were fortunate enough to be part of one of the trial services. So the increase there is about the number of calls that we went to on our 9 stations. So we worked with Fire Brigade Union locally, and our crews would go into calls which required basic life support really. So it was cardiac arrest, severe bleed, choking, or someone who's unconscious. You know, pointless having a firefighter if you're experiencing a stroke or TIA, something like that. You need a medical intervention. That's no good for us. We can do basic life support and a lot of care. So regrettably, the trial's come to an end, but those discussions through government and the trade unions are ongoing, and I think it's something that we should be striving to achieve. It doesn't matter what colour uniform you got on if you can save a life. And our road traffic collision stats are roughly about the same. But if you think of how long it takes you to get to work today than it did 15 years ago, it's certainly a lot longer because of the number of cars and road users that we've got. So not a stat which isn't go down fairly static, but one nevertheless because of the road users. And this is my last slide really that I just want to leave you with before I take any questions, because I don't want to make you late for the rest of the afternoon. But is a healthy society just a health board's issue? I'll throw that out there for take any questions.
So are there any questions for Hugh? Abby?
Thanks, Hugh. That was really helpful and useful to see a journey where you've really flipped the service from one of responding to crisis to prevention. How did you take the workforce on that journey, and tell us a little bit about the cultural change in the organisation?
Yeah, I think that's the other biggest piece of the jigsaw, and if I had another hour, I could probably take you through that. But without a shadow of doubt, it's not done without any cultural reform. And I was thinking around the conversations that we're having on fire stations and with crews that have been in, firefighters have been in 25, 30 years, etc. This isn't a job I joined. I joined to roll up my sleeves, kick in the dirt, kick in the doors, put the wet stuff on hot stuff, rub salt over my face, and the dirtier my kit gets, obviously, the better I must be. And I think when I joined 29 and a half years ago, the measure of success, or measure of how good a firefighter was how many dead people you've seen. And that can't be right. So it has been a massive cultural change. The organisation, we continue to learn, but the acceptance of doing things different is there within the organisation. And we've got some really great people that are innovative and want to strive to deliver even better services. But culture and the leadership of the organisation, I think, is a topic all in itself, really. And to move you from a reactive service, go back 25 years ago, we were funded on more fires we went to. There wasn't an incentive under the standard spend and assessment to reduce the number of calls you went to because you had less money. Whereas now, obviously, we don't fund it that way, which is a great success for us. But the cultural change within the organisation has been absolutely massive, in all fairness. And the younger people coming in, those that have joined, within the last 10 years or so, don't know any different. I think back to my first day riding a fire engine. We went around, we put up smoke detectors, and we put on security chains. It was in the Rhymney Valley, and it was a Rhymney Valley Safe and Secure scheme. It wasn't very well targeted. We'd knock on doors and see if anyone wanted one, and if they were in, we got a success, and if they weren't, we moved on to the next door. So it wasn't targeted, and our engagement through schools wasn't as professional as what we're doing now. Something we'd always done, but it wasn't targeted to the most vulnerable, and it wasn't targeted to those who needed our services the most. And I think that's the biggest fundamental change that we've been able to do, is to deliver our service to those who need it in our communities.
Hi, Hugh. That was really good. Thank you. It's just a question about how you engage with the front line in your organisation. Big organisations, how do you make sure that you engage with the front line? It's something that we are constantly thinking about how we do as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Fiona. I served for 10 years riding fire engines, so I wouldn't say I got a proud track record, but I joined a job that I loved, and I don't feel I've worked a day in the last 29 years, in all fairness, because I've loved everything that I've done. But workforce engagement is, I don't think none of us can underestimate how important that is. So probably twice a week, I'll do a station visit myself. It'll be a sit round the table. We'll have a cup of tea and we'll have a professional conversation around things that we've done, things that we're doing, and what does the future look like. And I think some of that has been framed around the last few years around austerity and reduction in budgets, change in pension schemes, medical response. From where I took up the job 7.5 years ago as a chief, the conversation I was having on fire stations around doing medical response and going to cardiac arrest calls, so different today than what it was 7.5 years ago. The whole mindset around what we are doing is we should be doing that. We are held back. We are prohibited on going as far as we would want to go because of the trade unions. We've got to respect the trade unions' legitimate role in protecting their members with that, and they're looking for a UK. But generally, it is face-to-face. That's the best form of communication. The honest feedback that I get around the table, the ground truth, I think is people aren't afraid to let me know what they feel, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And I welcome that honesty. I welcome the professional conversations that we have. I'm not the only one. The others on the management team would do the same. And we've got a programme visit throughout the year where between 5 of us, we will get to every station and every watch and speak to those that are on duty at that particular time. So unless you're on annual leave or something, you might miss what we call a principal officer or executive leadership team visit. But it's a structure. It tends to come from them, how they want the conversation to go, not us coming out and telling them everything that we want them to hear. And then email, well overused communication, isn't it? Email, our intranet site. I'm underwhelmed by the amount of people that don't read our newsletters, the effort that goes into that every month, in all fairness. I had a middle leader say to me the other day, oh, this momentum stuff that we're doing with the domestic abuse survivors and their children, firefighter for the day and that. I said, unbelievable, never knew we'd been doing it. We've been doing it for 2 years, and we have an article virtually in our newsletter and virtually every month. And this is a middle leader who we've just promoted. Really, really good at their job, but obviously don't read the newsletters. So, direct communication and something we've promoted is that honest feedback, and also from us as we went into austerity, it wasn't about gift wrapping bad news. So sitting in front of a fire station with 20 firefighters on, letting them know that they're under notice of redundancy, going to close their fire station, probably wasn't a highlight of my career. But what I was grounded in was honest conversations. We didn't sugarcoat it, we didn't put a bow on it. The conversation that I had with them, and they had with me, far more robustly coming back, I think, was that degree of honesty. Why were we closing the fire station? What did the stats say? What does the data say? And everything else. And it's just that professional honesty, I think.
Time for one more quick question. Okay, on that. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Thank you all.